Ancient civilizations, they forged swords that were incredibly advanced for their time, and each one stood at the peak of ancient warfare. These are the real blades that showed just how far early craftsmanship could go long before modern weapons existed. Join me for this one, it's going to be fun. It's 20 old swords and blades that look incredibly cool. Let's start with number 20, the Naue II sword. The Naue II sword, developed during the late Bronze Age, that's around 1200 BCE, it's one of the most influential blade designs of ancient history. First appearing in the Mycenaean world, and it quickly spread across the Mediterranean and into Central Europe, it remained in use for centuries, even after the transition from bronze to iron. Archaeological finds in Greece, Italy, Germany, and Austria confirm its wide distribution and long lifespan. The sword is recognizable by that leaf-shaped blade, the prominent midrib, and cast bronze construction. The midrib gave that blade rigidity while keeping the edges thin and sharp. Many surviving examples measure between 60 and 75 centimeters in length, making it suitable for both cutting and thrusting. The handle was typically constructed by casting the bronze tang with a series of perforations, which allowed wooden or horn, maybe even bone grips to be riveted securely. Some higher status versions did feature decorative bronze hilt fittings or carefully polished surfaces. Earlier Bronze Age swords often had vulnerabilities at the hilt-blade junction, where the tang could bend or break. This sword was an improvement by incorporating a longer, more integrated tang and a stronger blade shape. Metallurgical studies on some excavated samples showed deliberate alloy choices, bronze typically containing about 10 to 12% tin, which provided both hardness and a bit of flexibility. These alloys weren't experimental, they were based on generations of metalworking knowledge. The spread of the sword is well documented. As the late Bronze Age collapsed around 1200 BCE, many warrior groups were migrating or interacted across large distances, and the Naue II design moved with them. Italian smiths began producing their own versions, followed by Central European cultures of the Urnfield and Hallstatt periods. When iron became more available around 1000 to 900 BCE, the same blade pattern was replicated in this new metal, showing how effective this design was. The sword appears in many artistic depictions too: warriors on late Bronze Age pottery, small figurines from the Mycenaean sites, and carved reliefs all show this distinctive leaf-shaped blade. These depictions match the archaeological evidence closely. They suggest that the sword was an important status symbol, as well as a battlefield weapon. Number 19. The Celtic La Tène sword. The Celtic La Tène sword, named after the archaeological site on Lake Neuchâtel in Switzerland, is one of the most distinctive weapons of the European Iron Age. Produced between the 5th and 1st centuries BCE and found across France, Switzerland, Germany, Austria, Britain, and Ireland, it features a long, narrow iron blade often paired with elaborately decorated scabbards. These swords typically measure between 70 to 85 centimeters in length, though some examples exceed 90. The blades are straight and double-edged, optimized primarily for slashing from horseback or during fluid mobile combat, and many of these swords show evidence of pattern welding, which was a technique where layers of iron were forged together to improve its strength. This method does appear in Celtic blades centuries before it became common in early medieval Europe, which shows the Celts' advanced capabilities. The most striking aspect of these swords is the scabbards. Dozens of scabbards recovered from rivers, bogs, and graves feature ornate decoration, created with engraving and inlay techniques. Common motifs include spirals, S-curves, vegetal scrolls, trescelles, and geometric patterns, and they're the hallmarks of the La Tène artistic style. Some swords were constructed with organic hilt materials like wood, horn, or bone, which have mostly decayed. However, the metal fittings, the pommel caps, guard plates, and rivets survive in enough numbers to confirm its construction. In several well-preserved examples from Britain and France, the grips show ergonomic shaping that suggest an understanding of hand mechanics and balance. Many La Tène swords were found in rivers, especially the Thames, the Marne, suggesting a ritual deposition. Others came from warrior burials containing shields and spearheads. These contexts do indicate that the swords had some symbolic, social, and martial significance. While ancient Greek and Roman authors sometimes criticized Celtic weapons as prone to bending, metallurgical studies show that many of these swords were intentionally forged with flexible spines and hardened edges, an early form of differential heat treatment, and that created a blade that could withstand the shock of combat without snapping. Number 18. The Egyptian Khopesh. The Khopesh, one of the most recognizable weapons of ancient Egypt. dates from around 1800 BCE and remaining in use well into the New Kingdom at about 1070 BCE. It combines elements of an axe and a sword. More than 200 real examples do survive, along with numerous depictions on reliefs and tomb paintings, and those sources provide a clear factual record of its design. The khopesh has a curved, sickle-like shape, usually measuring between 50 to 60 centimeters in length. The outer edge of the curve served as the cutting surface, while the inner curve formed a hook that could catch shields, limbs, or even weapons. Early versions were made entirely of bronze, cast in molds, and then sharpened on the cutting edge. Later examples, dating from the late New Kingdom onward, included iron versions, showing Egypt's gradual adoption of ironworking technology. The construction of a khopesh varied depending on whether it was intended for combat or ceremony. Functional weapons were cast with thick spines for rigidity and tapered edges for cutting. Many featured tangs designed for wooden handles that were fastened by rivets, and some high-status versions, however, were forged with elaborate decorations. Some archaeological finds show that the khopesh wasn't only used by Egyptians, but also by neighboring cultures like the Canaanites and early Israelites. Examples excavated at Lachish and Megiddo, sites that match Egyptian forms closely, indicating widespread trade or even acquisition. Despite its prominence, the khopesh gradually disappeared from Egyptian arsenals by the beginning of the Iron Age. Changes in warfare, including increased use of longer straight swords and improved armor, made this sickle sword form less practical in later centuries. Number 17. The Roman gladius hispaniensis. The Roman gladius hispaniensis is the earliest form of the Roman gladius, and it's one of the most historically significant swords ever created. Introduced in the 3rd century BCE, it was based on blades used by Iberian tribes during Rome's wars in the Iberian Peninsula. Archaeological finds in Spain confirm its origins and those distinctive features, and Roman adoption of the design marked the turning point in ancient close combat tactics. It typically measures about 60 to 70 meters long with a straight double-edged blade, and what distinguishes it from later Roman gladii is the slight waist, the narrower middle, and a sharply tapered point designed for deep thrusting. Metallurgical analysis shows that these early gladii often had hardened cutting edges with more flexible cores, which is evidence of intentional heat treatment. The hilt was made from organic materials like bone, wood, or antler, which was fixed to the tang with rivets. Surviving scabbard fittings found in Spain and later across the Roman Empire feature bronze or iron frames with decorated lockets. Some bear geometric or motifs consistent with Iberian craftsmanship. Paired with the larger rectangular scutum shield, it enabled soldiers to deliver powerful thrusts from behind the shield wall. Historians Polybius and Livy describe Roman soldiers as using short stabbing motions in tight formations, which was an approach that gave the legions a major advantage over opponents who relied more heavily on slashing swords. Examples from Cannae, Ilipa, and multiple military sites show consistent blade lengths and shape, which does indicate standardized production. But this gladius remains the primary Roman sword until around the 1st century BCE, when it gradually evolved into the mains and later Pompey styles. Even as later sword types became shorter and more uniform, the fundamental principles established by the hispaniensis, rigid blade, optimizing thrusting point, and compact length, remain the foundation of the Roman sword design. Number 16. The Chinese Bronze Jin. The Chinese bronze jin of China's Warring States period represents one of the most technically sophisticated bronze swords ever. Numerous examples have been excavated from tombs in Henan, Hubei, and Hebei, and many are remarkably well preserved due to the chemical composition of the bronze and the burial environment. The jin's clean, straight profile and balanced double edge make it an iconic weapon. Now, these bronze jins typically measured between 40 and 55 centimeters for single-handed versions, though some longer ceremonial blades did exceed 60. They were cast using composite molds, then cold-hammered and sharpened to create a strong cutting edge. Bronze alloy analysis reveals high tin content. Many blades often exceed 15%, which was a ratio that yields exceptional hardness. Some swords show intentional differential casting with harder bronze at the edges and tougher, slightly softer cores to resist breakage. But one of the most famous examples is the Sword of Gujian, discovered in 1965 in Hubei province. Although not unique in form, its pristine condition and microstructure complexity provide valuable insight into the capabilities of the metallurgist back then. The blade exhibits high tin bronze edges, a pattern inlay on the surface, and exceptional corrosion resistance due to deliberate alloying choices. These kind of traits appear in varying degrees on many other excavated swords, which show that advanced craftsmanship was widespread rather than isolated. The straight blade and pointed tip make it ideal for thrusting, while sharpened edges allow effective slashes. The hilt typically consists of a guard, grip, and pommel made of bronze, wood, or bone, and many incorporate geometric patterns or inscriptions that identify the sword's owner or the workshop where it was produced. In addition to battlefield use, though, the jin served as a status symbol among the aristocracy. Nobles were often buried with elaborately decorated blades featuring turquoise, jade, or lacquered wooden scabbards. The popularity of the bronze jin declined, though, after the Qin and Han dynasties introduced iron and steel swords, which obviously offered superior durability. However, the jin remained culturally important, eventually becoming a symbol of scholarly virtue and martial refinement in later Chinese traditions. Number 15. The Greek Xiphos. The Xiphos, used throughout archaic and classical Greece, about the 8th century to 4th centuries BCE, is one of the most recognizable ancient Greek swords. It's distinguished by that leaf-shaped blade, and the Xiphos was typically used as a secondary weapon by hoplites, complementing the spear. Numerous archaeological finds from Greece, Italy, and the wider Mediterranean, along with depictions on pottery, sculpture, and armor, give historians a detailed understanding of its construction. Most blades range from 40 to 60 centimeters in length. The defining feature is the broad midsection that narrows towards both the hilt and point. This geometry provides excellent cutting capability while maintaining a strong tapered tip for thrusting. The hilt was usually composed of organic material like bone, wood, or ivory fixed to a full tang, and because the materials rarely survive, many Xiphos artifacts consist of only the blade, though the guard and pommel fittings made of bronze or iron are often preserved. Pottery scenes from the 6th and 5th centuries BCE frequently depict hoplites carrying Xiphos swords at their left side, ready to be drawn once spear combat became too close or once a spear was broken. The Xiphos wasn't the primary weapon of the phalanx, but it did play a crucial role when formations collapsed into hand-to-hand engagement. That leaf-shaped profile is not unique to Greece either. Similar blades existed in Bronze Age Europe and the Near East, but the Greek Xiphos represented one of the most refined Iron Age interpretations of this ancient form. The balance and cutting efficiency make it a standout weapon in the study of ancient arms. And by the 4th century BCE, longer straight swords like the kopis and makhaira grew popular among certain troops, especially the cavalry, but the Xiphos remained well in use into the Hellenistic period. Today, it's widely regarded as one of the most iconic sword designs of the ancient Greek world. Number 14. The Falcata. The Iberian falcata is one of the most distinctive weapons of the ancient Western Mediterranean. It originated among the Iberian tribes of modern-day Spain and Portugal around the 5th century BCE. It features a forward-curving, single-edged blade that's optimized for powerful chopping and slashing. The blade of a falcata typically measures between 45 to 60 centimeters. The defining feature is that inward curve near the hilt, which then sweeps forward to a heavy, downward angled grip. This geometry concentrates the force towards the point of impact, resulting in exceptional cutting performance. Many blades have a thick spine that tapers towards a single edge, giving the weapon strength without any excessive weight. Iberian smiths used pattern welding and lamination. They combined iron with different carbon contents to produce a blade that was both hard and resilient. Some blades displayed grooves or fullers, which likely served to lighten the sword while maintaining its strength. Several high-status examples include silver inlays, engraved motifs, or zoomorphic hilts, often shaped like horses or birds, indicating great craftsmanship and symbolic importance. The hilt of the falcata is typically enclosed, curving inward to form a hooked pommel. This design provides a secure grip and prevents the sword from slipping during forceful strikes. Many hilts were constructed from iron with decorative bronze or silver coverings, and organic grip materials rarely survived. Many richly decorated examples have been found in aristocratic tombs alongside spears, shields, and horse gear. The weapon also appears prominently in Iberian sculpture and reliefs, like those at Osuna and Porciuna, where the warriors wielded curved blades consistent with falcata forms. Several Roman writers, including Livy and Polybius, described the devastating cutting ability of Iberian swords, noting that they could slice through shields and armor more effectively than many contemporary weapons. Although such claims can be hyperbolic, some studies confirm that Iberian falcatas were exceptionally well forged. The Romans did adopt some Iberian forging techniques, but the specific curved design was replaced by straight Roman swords like the gladius and spata. Nevertheless, the falcata is one of the most visually striking and technically sophisticated swords in the ancient world. Number 13. The warabite to. The Japanese warabite-to is an early Japanese sword dating from the late Yayoi to early Kofun period, roughly the 3rd to 5th century CE. It's named for its characteristic hilt shape, which resembles the curled frond of the warabi fern. It was excavated primarily from burial mounds across Honshu and Kyushu. These swords represent a transitional stage between earlier bronze weapons and the later straight chokuto and curved tachi, which would eventually influence the katana. Typical warabite-to measured between 40 to 55 centimeters. They are straight or slightly curved and single-edged, with a broad base that tapers towards the tip. Early examples were made from iron using simple forging methods, but later versions showed more advanced metallurgical techniques, including folded construction and localized hardening. Early forms of the methods that became central to later Japanese swordsmithing. Now, of course, the most distinctive feature is that hilt, which terminates in a curved flourish resembling a fern shoot. This form is integral to the iron tang, not a separate attachment. Because organic wrapping materials rarely survive, most surviving hilts are bare iron. The blades often include grooves or hi running parallel to the spine, which did help reduce weight without sacrificing any strength. Several excavated specimens are highly decorated, featuring inlaid silver, bronze fittings, or engraved patterns. Some Chinese and Korean influences here are evident, particularly in early straight-bladed iron swords imported or adapted from mainland models. However, the warabite-to shows distinctly local innovations, especially in the hilt design and the gradual experimentation with blade curvature. These changes anticipate the shift towards curved cavalry swords that would later dominate Japanese warfare in later centuries. The warabite-to disappears by the 6th century as swordsmiths adopted more standardized chokuto and tachi forms. Nevertheless, it's a crucial artifact in the evolution of Japanese sword design, with clean lines, a distinctive hilt, and transitional forging techniques. It is both visually unique and historically significant, a clear step on the path towards Japan's best-known swords. Number 12. The Persian akanakis. The Persian akanakis is one of the most characteristic weapons of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, a short sword or large dagger typically carried by nobles, officers, and royal guards. Excavations at Persepolis and Susa, at sites across the Caucasus and Central Asia, have produced numerous examples, giving researchers a clear understanding of how the weapon was made and used. Most blades measured between 35 to 50 centimeters. They're double-edged and generally straight, with a midrib that provides some rigidity. Early examples were made of iron, using simple forging techniques, while later specimens do show some more complex construction, including laminated blades and hardened cutting edges. The tip is typically reinforced, making the weapon effective for thrusting at close range. Many surviving hilts have a trilobate or three-lobed pommel, often paired with a short guard that curves slightly towards the blade. These hilts could be made from iron, bronze, or organic materials like wood or bone. And in high-status examples, the hilt and scabbard fittings are richly decorated with gold, silver, or inlays. Reliefs at Persepolis depict Persian nobles carrying this sword suspended from a belt on their right side. This is an unusual placement. Most cultures wore swords on the left, which reflects the weapon's symbolic role. It was as much a ceremonial item marking rank as it was a battlefield tool. It was not a primarily an infantry weapon, but it was often carried by the cavalry or royal attendants, and because Persian warfare relied heavily on archery and cavalry shock tactics, it served as a backup weapon for situations where a bow or spear couldn't be used. The scabbards are frequently elaborate. Bronze and iron scabbards with decorated lockets and shapes have been found across the empire, and many feature Achaemenid geometric patterns or animal imagery. Some include belt loops or rings that match the depictions on palace reliefs. The design likely originated in the Caucasus and Central Asia before being adopted by the Persians. Variants are found among the Scythians, the Medes, and early Armenians, but the Achaemenid version is distinctive for that hilt form and decorative style. The weapon did gradually disappear after the fall of the empire, replaced by longer cavalry swords and Hellenistic blade forms, but today it remains one of the most iconic and visually striking weapons of the ancient Near East. It's compact, elegantly crafted, and unmistakably tied to Persian identity. Number 11. The Ulfbert Sword. The Viking Ulfbert Sword. It's one of the most famous weapon types of the early medieval period, dating from the 9th to 11th centuries CE. Over 170 examples or fragments have been discovered across Scandinavia, Germany, Finland, the Baltic states, and Russia. The swords are identifiable by an inscription on the blade, representing either a personal name or the signature of a workshop tradition. All known examples are fully authenticated archaeological finds. Ulfbert's swords belong to the broader family of Carolingian and Viking-age double-edged swords. Most measure between 85 to 90 centimeters in total length, with broad tapered blades and central fullers to reduce the weight. But what sets these swords apart is the consistently high quality of their steel. Metallurgical analysis has shown many of them were made from crucible steel, a material far superior to the bloomery steel common in Europe at the time. Crucible steel was produced by melting iron with carbon under controlled conditions, creating a pure, uniform metal capable of holding an exceptionally sharp edge. Several Ulfbert blades tested by researchers exhibit carbon contents comparable to later medieval and even early modern steels. Their microstructure shows a minimal slag inclusion and a high degree of homogeneity. This steel was far more resistant to breakage and deformation than typical Viking swords, which did often require pattern welding to compensate for inconsistent iron quality. The inscriptions themselves on the swords vary. Scholars believe that the original Ulfbert was likely a master swordsmith or workshop active in the Frankish Empire, and later craftsmen, some less skilled, copied the name to market their blades. Differences in steel quality clearly distinguish the authentic crucible steel from the later imitations. The hilts of these swords follow common Viking-age forms: short, straight guards, lobed or trilobate pommels, and grips made from wood wrapped in leather or textile. Some scabbards that were preserved in waterlogged condition show construction from wood lined with wool and covered in leather. But the distribution of Ulfbert's swords indicates that they were prestige weapons. Many are found in high-status graves, often buried with shields, spears, and ornate mounts. Others have been recovered from rivers, consistent with ritual deposition. And despite the persistent internet myths, there's no evidence that Ulfbert's swords were mysteriously advanced or out of place in their time. They are simply the best quality swords available in early medieval Europe. They were produced with superior imported steel and exceptional craftsmanship. Number 10. The Han Dynasty Dao. A single-edged Chinese sword, the Dao, became a dominant weapon during the Han Dynasty. When earlier Chinese swords were primarily double-edged jian, archaeological discoveries from Han tombs and military sites confirm the rapid rise of the Dao as ironworking advanced. The shift from bronze to wrought iron and early steel allowed for stronger, more resilient blades capable of delivering powerful cuts. Most Han Dao were straight or slightly curved, measuring between 60 to 90 centimeters. The defining characteristic is the single cutting edge with a thick spine on the opposite side. Many excavated Dao exhibit forge-welded construction with multiple layers of iron and steel fused together. The hilt typically consists of a wooden grip, sometimes wrapped with leather or cord. Bronze or iron guards and pommels provided some structural reinforcement too, though Han Dao were generally simpler in decoration than later swords. Evidence from Han military texts and archaeological findings indicate that Dao were used widely in infantry, cavalry, and border garrisons. The weapon's durability made it suited for extended campaigns, and its cutting strength was particularly effective against both lightly armored tribes of the northern frontier and the heavily clothed opponents in the southern region. Early Dao blades often have a straight cutting edge, while later examples transition into a subtle curve. Some swords even incorporated early forms of pattern welding, identifiable through characteristic patterns where the iron meets steel layers. The Dao's rise also coincided with changes in Chinese military tactics. As cavalry became more important, a single-edged, strong blade allowed riders to strike effectively from horseback. The Dao was also easier to train soldiers to use in mass formations, and by the end of the Han Dynasty, the Dao had overtaken other swords as the primary military sword in China. Number 9. The Greek Kopis. The Greek kopis, one of the most visually distinctive sword types of the ancient Mediterranean, was used by Greek soldiers, Thracians, and various mercenary groups from the 6th to the 3rd centuries BCE. Kopis blades typically measure between 48 to 65 centimeters in length, and the blade widens towards the front, which concentrates the mass near the tip. That weight distribution generates momentum during a swing, making the kopis effective for powerful cleaving strikes. The blade's back edge is thick and unsharpened, and while the cutting edge is convex and curves inwards before sweeping forward, that geometry results in deep, controlled cuts even against shielded or armored opponents. It was primarily forged from iron, though some earlier versions may incorporate steel produced through bloomery refining and carburization. Surviving blades often display a central ridge or reinforced spine for some structural strength. and several excavated examples do show evidence of differential heat treatment, where the edge was hardened while the spine remained tougher and more flexible. The hilt of a kopis usually features a downward curving guard and a hook-shaped pommel, sometimes designed to lock the hand firmly in place during heavy strikes. The grip material would include bone and occasionally ivory fixed to the tang by rivets, and many hilts were decorated with bronze fittings, and some elite versions have engraved motifs. Discoveries in southern Italy, particularly associated with the Greek colonies, reveal some local adaptations of the kopis. Some blades are longer and more curved, which bridges the gap between the kopis and the Italian falx. The kopis eventually declined in popularity as straight swords and the Roman gladius became more dominant in the Mediterranean world. However, the forward curved blade design survived in later weapons like the Iberian falcata and the Persian shamshir, though the lineage between them is not direct. Number 8. The Roman spatha. The Roman spatha became a dominant sword of the Roman world from the 2nd to the 5th century CE. It was originally inspired by longer Celtic and Germanic blades. It eventually replaced the gladius as Rome's primary military sword. Spathae typically measure about 70 to 90 centimeters in length, significantly longer than early gladius, and the blade is straight, double-edged, and designed for both cutting and thrusting. Many later examples, especially from the late Roman period, feature pattern-welded construction. Edges were often hardened through quenching, while the core was left tougher to prevent catastrophic breaking, and this method did improve the cutting performance without really sacrificing its durability. The hilt of the spatha generally included a short guard, a flattened oval or disc-shaped pommel, and a wooden grip that secured to a full tang. Scabbards were made from wood covered with leather and fitted with bronze or iron mounts. The dragon-headed scabbard fittings from Britain and Gaul are particularly well known. The spatha was first widely issued to Roman cavalry because its longer reach made it effective from horseback, and by the 3rd century CE, infantry units also adopted it. Spathae appeared in both military and civilian contexts, and numerous examples have been recovered from rivers and bogs across northern Europe, often deposited deliberately as votive offerings. High-status burials, like those in the Rhineland or Anglo-Saxon England, include spathae with richly decorated hilts and scabbard mounts. Number 7. The Indian talwar. The talwar, it's one of the most iconic swords of the Indian subcontinent, took its early recognizable form during the medieval period. While the fully developed talwar is associated with the Mughal and Rajput eras, its early forms, dating from the 13th to 15th centuries, are well documented in archaeological finds. Early talwar blades were generally single-edged with a gentle to moderate curvature and a sharpened, often reinforced point suitable for thrusting. The blades range from 70 to 85 centimeters in length, and studies on early Indian swords reveal high-quality crucible steel, commonly known as woots, used in many blades. Woot steel is characterized by its high carbon content and uniform microstructure. This kind of steel is capable of holding an extremely sharp edge and resisting fracturing, qualities that were praised in Arab, Persian, and European accounts. The hilt of the early talwar already displays features that would later define the weapon. These includes a disc-shaped pommel, which locks the hand in securely, and a short, straight crossguard with slightly downward-angled killians. Some hilts were cast from brass or iron, while others used steel with decorative inlays, thin layers of gold or silver hammered into etched designs. Indian literary sources and temple sculptures from the medieval period do have depictions of curved swords that closely resemble these talwar forms. The early talwar eventually evolved into the fully developed Mughal-era sword, distinguished by heavier curvature, elaborate hilts, and ornate decoration. Number 6. The Tang Dynasty Jin. The Tang Dynasty Jin. It represents one of the most refined, straight, double-edged swords ever produced in China. Tang Jins were made with advanced steel forging techniques that had developed across several dynasties. They typically measure 70 to 90 centimeters in length. They're straight, double-edged, and known for their precise balance. Most were forged using high-quality steel, created through bloomery smelting and subsequent repeated folding. While the popular idea of thousands of folds is exaggerated in modern culture, studies confirm that Tang smiths did fold the steel to even out the carbon distribution and remove impurities, resulting in blades with consistent hardness and flexibility. Hilts consisted of wooden grips wrapped in cord or silk, paired with guards and pommels made from bronze, iron, or steel, and many guards have distinctive ring pommel designs, though disc-shaped pommels are also found. Decorative inlays using silver, gold, or jade appear in higher status examples, especially those associated with military officers or court officials. It was used by both infantry and cavalry. Military manuals of the time and mural art from sites like Don Huang depict soldiers equipped with jians as sidearms, while primary weapons like spears and polearms dominated the front line. But by the end of the Tang Dynasty, the curved dao swords increasingly replaced the jian in military contexts due to their superior cutting performance for the cavalry. However, the Tang jian continued to be used symbolically and ceremonially for centuries, eventually becoming associated with scholars and martial arts traditions rather than battlefield use. Number 5. The Roman Pugio. The Pugio was the standard dagger carried by Roman legionaries during the late Republic and early Empire. While not a sword in the strict sense, its size, design, and widespread presence make it an essential blade in the study of Roman weapons. Most pugiones have blade lengths between 18 and 28 centimeters with a double-edged, leaf-shaped profile. Early versions were cast in bronze, but by the 1st century CE, most were made of wrought iron or steel. The hilt is one of its most recognizable features. Many hilts include organic grip plates, typically wood or bone, that are attached to the tang with iron or bronze rivets. The guard and pommel are usually made of bronze or iron and often decorated with geometric engravings. High-ranking officers sometimes carried elaborately decorated pugiones with the silver-inlaid hilt or intricate scabbard fitting. Roman scabbards commonly featured metal frames with openwork designs including scroll motifs, military symbols, or simple geometric cutouts. The back of each scabbard held a wooden lining to protect the blade, and many examples preserved suspension rings used to attach the daggers to a soldier's belt. The Pugio had some ceremonial and symbolic roles as well. Officers and centurions wore decorated versions as symbols of authority, and they also became infamous in one of Roman history's most pivotal moments. Julius Caesar was assassinated by conspirators using pugiones, as reported by Plutarch. But by the late 2nd century CE, the Pugio declined in military use and was largely phased out of legionary equipment. And today it's instantly recognizable. It's compact, deadly, and intricately crafted. Its elegant leaf-shaped blade and ornate scabbards makes it one of the most visually cool ancient blades ever discovered. Number 4. The Chinese Warring State Ringed Pommel Sword. The Wanshou Dao or Wanshou Jian, depending on the type, is one of the most elegant and recognizable weapons from China's Warring States period. Found in large numbers across Henan, Hubei, Shanxi, Shandong, and Inner Mongolia, these swords represent a transitional phase from bronze weaponry to iron and early steel. Ring pommel swords typically feature a circular pommel formed as an iron or bronze ring attached to the end of the tang. This ring served multiple purposes. It balanced the blade, provided a means to attach tassels, and held ceremonial significance. The swords exist in both single-edged and double-edged forms. Double-edged versions align with the Jian tradition, while single-edged forms resemble the early Dao. Many blades measure 60 to 80 centimeters, though shorter and longer examples exist. Their clean, straight lines reflect some technical sophistication. Bronze examples were cast using sectional molds and then hammer-finished for sharpness, while iron versions show forge-welded construction. Analysis reveals alternating layers of iron with different carbon content, which provides strength and flexibility. And that advanced method does predate similar techniques that later became widespread in East Asian swordmaking. But ring pommel swords often appear in elite burials, suggesting a status symbolism. Many high-quality examples include inlays of silver, gold, or turquoise. The weapon does also appear frequently in artwork. Bronze mirrors, lacquer-painted coffins, and pottery figurines depict ring pommel swords carried by nobles, guards, and charioteers. All these depictions align closely with examples, which reinforces confidence in their function and ceremonial role. But its versatility helped it spread across East and Central Asia. Similar forms appear in early Korean and Japanese contexts, almost certainly introduced through interactions with Chinese states and the Qing Han Empire. The Japanese warabite-to we talked about and earlier chokuto show clear structural influence. And by the end of the Han Dynasty, ring pommel swords were gradually replaced by more standardized iron Dao and Jian. However, their legacy has persisted in the ring pommels used on some later ceremonial weapons. Number 3. The Macedonian Kopis. The Macedonian kopis, also called the makhaira in some ancient sources, was a curved, forward-weighted sword used widely in the Greek world, especially among the cavalry. While kopis appears in Greek history, it became strongly associated with Macedonian forces under Philip II and Alexander the Great during the 4th century BCE. These Macedonian kopis blades are typically 50 to 70 centimeters long, and their defining feature is the forward curving shape, which concentrates the mass towards the front. This kind of weight distribution does allow powerful chopping cuts, especially when delivered from horseback. The backside of the blade is thick and unsharpened, while the cutting edge curves inward before sweeping forward. The hilt of the kopis usually includes a downward curving guard and a hook-shaped pommel designed to keep the hand secure. Surviving hilts often incorporate wood or bone scales riveted to a full iron tang. The bronze or iron guards do add reinforcement, and some high-status versions include decorative motifs. The kopis appears in a wide range of artistic depictions. Greek red figure pottery, Hellenistic sculptures, and even Persian reliefs show Greek mercenaries and cavalry wielding these curved blades. While the kopis sometimes is confused with the Iberian falcata, the two developed independently, though they share similar cutting-oriented geometry. The kopis is generally more slender, and it's optimized for cavalry, while the falcata has a broader blade suited for infantry chopping. But by the 3rd century BCE, the kopis gradually gave way to the straight-bladed xiphos and other Hellenistic swords, though curved sabers did remain popular among cavalry in many regions. Number 2. The Song Dynasty Dao. During the Song Dynasty, about 960 to 1270 CE, the Dao reached one of its most advanced forms. While the earlier Han Dao established the single-edged sword tradition in China, Song-era metallurgy, military reforms, and advances in steel production elevated the weapon into a highly engineered battlefield tool. Song Dao typically measured 70 to 90 centimeters and featured a curved, single-edged blade with a strong spine. Many excavated examples show differential heat treatment, with hardened edges and softer, more flexible backings. Metallurgical studies confirm that Song smiths practiced forge welding of layered steels, resulting in blades with high durability and cutting power. The era also saw the separation of the Dao into multiple functional types, including the Jibei Dao, the straight-backed saber, the Luye Dao, the willow leaf saber with a gentle curve, the Pian Dao, deeply curved slicing saber used by cavalry, and the Fengbian Shou Dao, compact, broad-bladed saber for infantry. While later Ming and Qing sabers are more numerous in collections, Song forms are well documented in texts which describes weapons, forging methods, and tactical uses. The Song hilts were typically octagonal or oval in cross-section, wrapped with leather or cord, and paired with guards that could be round, oval, or slightly downturned. Scabbards were made from lacquered wood with metal fittings. Several richly decorated examples found in elite burials, engraved dragons, and other motifs are common to Song aristocratic art. And although the Song dynasty ultimately fell to the Mongols, the Dao remains central in Chinese weapon manufacturing. Later dynasties adapted and evolved these designs, but the Song Dao stands out as one of the most advanced early sabers. Today, it's recognized as a crucial step in the evolution of Chinese swordmaking. Number 1. The Tachi. The Tachi of Japan's Heian period, around 794 to 1185 CE, is one of the most important blades in world history. It represents the stage at which Japanese swordsmithing transitioned from simple imported iron blades to a fully developed, differentially hardened sword for which Japan later became renowned. Tachi typically measures 70 to 85 centimeters in blade length, with a pronounced curvature peaking near the center or slightly towards the hilt. This curvature does distinguish the Tachi from earlier straight chokuto and marks the moment when Japanese smiths optimized blades for cavalry-based slashing. The defining feature of the Tachi is its differential hardening technique, which creates a hardened steel edge and a softer spine. This is achieved by coating the spine with a thick layer of clay before quenching, slowing its cooling rate. The result is a sharp, durable edge supported by a resilient, shock-absorbing back. Smiths also practiced laminated construction, such as kobuse, the hard steel jacket over a softer core, and occasionally a 3-layer configuration. These techniques produced strong, flexible blades that resisted breaking. Early examples from the Yamato and Bizen schools exhibit refined grain patterns resulting from careful folding, and contrary to later popular belief, folding was used to homogenize the steel, not create any decorative surface, and real examples demonstrate a high level of functional knowledge. Tachi hilts were constructed from wood wrapped with cord or leather and fitted with guards, tsuba, that ranged from simple iron discs to more ornate bronze designs. The scabbards, or saya, were lacquered wood, sometimes decorated with mother-of-pearl or metalwork. Tachi represents one of the earliest fully mature Japanese swords, combining that curvature, differential hardening, folded steel, and laminated construction. Today, tachi are considered national treasures. They are admired for their clean, graceful lines and technical sophistication. They do mark the true beginning of the Japanese curved sword tradition, and they remain some of the most visually stunning swords ever created.